Okay, so just before we go into the actual program, I wanted to let everyone know a little bit about the Katalyst for those of you who have not seen any of our previous events. And the Katalyst is basically, I launched the Katalyst in 2019 last year. And the intention behind the Katalyst is to really try to combine different fields of information that we normally think are very different from one another, but actually when joined together make a lot more sense. So for example, the idea behind the Katalyst is to combine science with spiritual data and look at the correlations between them. And really the idea behind it was the intention behind it was because a lot of people now think that science still doesn't prove a lot of things that we talk about in the spiritual field. For example, the idea that consciousness exists outside of the brain, uh, and um, and the problem with this was that a lot of the information, the scientific data that is out there doesn't really seem to reach us, whether it's through schools or through the media or through our governments. I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this already know that a lot of the information out there that is very important for us doesn't reach us at all. So the intention behind the Katalyst was really to try to combine this information and get it from the people themselves, from the professionals who are working in those very fields. So who are the scientists, the spiritual, the transcendental meditation sitters, the meditators, everyone who is involved in this field and who's actually there on the ground experiencing these very effects. That we want to that prove that reality is very different from what we know it to be. So with that in mind, we also in the Katalyst, we like to do this in a form of entertaining people as well. So with that, we have a lot of, we screen films as well as having the discussions on a specific theme. So today we're going to be screening some incredible films in the second part of the event. So I hope that you guys can stay and join us for those, because we not only have a few of the filmmakers joining us and explaining how they came about to create those incredible films, but also we'll be engaging in a huge discussion at the very end. So if you do have any questions, make sure you save them until the end. And yeah, we'll hear from everyone on the panel on these. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my guest for today. We have Jeremy Ode joining us, who is an author of the Super Radiance Effect, and he's also the founder of the worldpeacegroup.org. That's an online platform which gathers all the evidence and data from the World Group Peace projects that happened, especially during the 70s and the 80s, where huge groups of transcendental meditation sitters would go into war zones and would try to bring about peace through meditation, through practicing transcendental meditation, and bringing about peace in those zones. That's only one of the effects that transcendental meditation can have. Of course, it has a lot more effects, such as reducing suicides, reducing political problems in the area that they're doing it in. So we're going to hear a lot more from Jeremy on that. And Jeremy is also a psychotherapist and an Ayurveda practitioner and a management coach. And he himself is a transcendental meditation sitter. So he's going to be discussing some of the studies behind the World Peace Project and some of his own experiences of taking part in those mass meditations in the 70s and 80s, and also some of his work which he's doing currently. We also have on the panel joining us Ron Rigsrud, who is the founder of Clay Hands organization and Hogaris Claret Rehabilitation Center. Ron has also been, he's a transcendental meditation sitter, and for quite a few years, and he actually took part in some of the mass meditations in Nicaragua back in the 70s, where there were a lot of war conflicts going on. So he as well will also be contributing some of his personal experiences of what it was like to be part of those. And also Ron, for the last 25 years, Ron has also worked as a dealer of Colombian emeralds. So if any of you out there are looking for emeralds, then Ron is your man. And he also founded the charity called A Clay Hand, which I mentioned earlier, which uses meditation as part of a rehabilitation program for kids in Sasaima in Colombia. And clay hands also provides alternative construction to help address the housing needs for workers and families in remote areas of Colombia who are directly related to the emerald mines. So as you can see, both of our guest panelists have plenty of experience behind their belt. So we have a lot of information here to discuss. We do also have another one of our other guests, Roger Nelson, which we're currently waiting for, but I'm sure he would join us I'm sure he will join us today at some point. So we will engage in that discussion with his Global Consciousness Project, which I'm sure many of you have read about in some of the descriptions that I've posted earlier. So, right, let's see. Jeremy, sorry, I have to find my way around with this, so it's still a little confusing. How are you? And let's start with you. Tell me a little bit more about the work peace group that you've created online and how the whole thing came about.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, a few years ago, I realized there was a gap in a very large gap in the public's understanding and a complete absence in any media coverage or any government interest in the effects of what are called super radiance. And I also discovered there was a huge body of research. There's something like 53 studies have been carried out over 30, 40 years in various parts of the world with various institutes, and it's all buried deep, as you mentioned earlier. There's so much going on that validates these sort of things, which is completely unseen and unheard of and unknown to the vast majority of the population. So that's really what I started doing. I've experienced some of these actual projects myself. I've been on them, I've been part of them. It's completely obvious to me that it works fantastically well. It's the effect is automatic, it's spontaneous, it's very, very quick. In fact, the original slogan on my website was "World Peace in 24 hours." Just try and underestimate what was going on, but it is that quick. And so I set the website up. I had a charity already, which I was running, called the Natural Health Research Trust. Indeed, the charity was set up to look at aspects of research into natural medicine and areas of public health. And so I've designed the website to actually try and raise money to try and fund a group, which is what I'm doing at the moment, is trying to set up a pilot study. I'd say it's an action research study to show to the UK government the effect of, say, a small group in a specified area, try and predict the results before we do it, and then test the results as we go along. And what I'm looking for is government funding to do it. We don't need a huge amount of money, so they should be able to afford it. Spraying money everywhere on everything else at the moment, so this will be very useful. And then watch what happens, and I would anticipate that we would then see crime to go down. I would like to think that incidences of COVID-19 would go down, but I can't really predict that at the moment. It's one of the reasons why we're doing the study. But certainly in a couple of studies, previous studies, the rate of infectious diseases did go down. But that was under normal conditions. It wasn't under a pandemic or the situation we've got at the moment. So I wouldn't like to definitely predict that that's going to happen. And then publish the results and try and go into phase 2, basically, is expand the group. There's a lot of logistics involved in setting up a permanent group like that, and I think that needs to be tackled.
Yeah,
that answers your question.
yeah, no, it does perfectly. Thank you for that. So tell me a bit about the Maharishi effect, because that's what really the Transcendental Meditation was based on, wasn't it? What's the idea behind it? Who is Maharishi? For anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure most people know, but who is he, and what was the group that he created back in the 70s and 80s? What was the intention behind it?
Well, Maharishi came out of silence. He was a guru in the Himalayas. He had a master who we call Guru Dev, who got him to the stage of enlightenment, I suppose. And I would say he got the inclination to go out to the West to try and establish. Actually, the original name of his movement was the Spiritual Regeneration Movement. And that says it all. He was trying to revive spirituality in the West. He'd seen it decline. And he was concerned that our fixation, our addiction with materialism was getting out of hand, and Western countries in particular becoming more and more destructive. You know, the atomic bomb, for instance, it started off with a big bang in Hiroshima in 1945, but since then we were accumulating more and more of these nuclear weapons. But we see other things, other aspects, toxic aspects of our society also causing problems, with pollution and so on and so forth. And he felt that what mankind needed was, as he said, a new seed to create a new crop. That we've got to actually start thinking in a different way and relating more and aligning ourselves more with nature. And his route to do that was to teach as many people as possible to learn a simple technique of transcendental meditation. He learned very early on that people weren't particularly interested in the wider goals of the movement, but he did notice that it helped people with their headaches and stress and things like that. So it became a bit of a stress management technique, and but people, gradually cottoned on. And there was he started about 1959. Ron will correct me if I'm wrong on that. And it really got underway in the 70s. But in the 60s, he had predicted that if we get enough people to meditate, and by enough, he meant a very small percentage of the population. He actually said 1%. If you can get 1% of the population to meditate at home, they don't have to do it together or anything like that. They just do it at home as part of their normal daily routine. Then you would see negative trends in society gradually subside and positive trends gradually grow. Well, of course, that didn't happen for a while, but during the 70s, there was a rush of teaching, and it became apparent that a number of towns in the United States had reached the 1% threshold. So a couple of proactive researchers thought, well, why don't we have a look at them? Let's look at these towns and see if what Maharishi was saying 10 years ago is coming about. And hey ho, sure enough, when I think the first study was about 11 towns, cities. They weren't very big. They were 10 to 25,000 people, 25 to 50,000 people, but they matched those with 11 controlled cities for population and population size, geographic area, and the sort of residents they had, like how many students they had, and so on and so forth. And they noticed that there was an 8% on average drop in crime, whereas in the 70s, if you don't know, that the crime level was going up and up and every year. So there was an 8% increase in the control group. So there's like a 16% gap. And that kicked off the research, really. They then went into it in slightly more sophisticated detail. So that's known as the Maharishi effect, because that's the 1% effect. But then towards the end of the 70s, he developed a deeper, longer program of meditation for people who were already doing the TM technique. And this was called the TM City program. So it's slightly more powerful. He called it jet propelled technique for people to do. And he said, well, if we can get groups of these TM siddhas together in one place at the same time, then there's a hugely disproportionate increase in the effect they're having on society. So instead of 1%, we're now talking about the square root of 1%. So it's a tiny fraction of the population. And bear in mind, there's no interaction with the rest of the population. We do this in silence and in a group, tucked away somewhere, minding our own business. And it needs to be done on a daily basis. And then the effect only lasts so long as the group is in place. But again, he wanted to try this out scientifically, and very early on, having taught people the city program, he started doing experiments to see what the actual effect was. And I think Ron was on one of the pieces peace projects in Nicaragua, where there was a spectacular reduction in violence. And since that time, there's been about 40 odd different projects, 45 different projects around the world, testing various aspects of the super radiance effect. So the super radiance we use for the square root of 1% of the population. So it has massive opportunities for mankind, because the larger the group, there's a huge increase in the number of people that it can actually help. So for instance, for a country the size of the UK, which is a very small percentage of the global population, you need about 800 to 1,000 people to have a decent effect. But for the whole world, you only need another, you need 8,000 people. We'd like to get 10,000, but 8 or 9,000 people is all you need to cover the entire world.
Wow. That's not a lot for 7
sorry?
billion people. That's not a lot for 7 billion people in the world.
No, it's not. And that's just in one place at one time. And the occasions when a global peace group has been in place, it's fairly rare and hasn't lasted for very long. The longest time was in India, where Maharishi trained. In those days, it was 7,000 people. This goes back in the early 90s. And he had, yes, 7,000 pundits in place, and they were doing the program on a daily basis. And fighting stopped everywhere in the world. And it was during that period that the Soviet Union collapsed, the Cold War ended, and international relations just transformed almost overnight. If you go back to 1989, when it all started to happen in Europe and the Berlin Wall came down and all the rest of it, it all just started to unfold peaceably. I mean, the Soviet Union collapsed. It was a totalitarian state, and it just collapsed without a shot being fired. And that was entirely due to this group in India, and I would say some quite intense teaching of TM in Russia. The Soviet authorities made the mistake of allowing TM teachers into Russia, and Maharishi poured them in there and taught a lot of people. I'm talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and it just had the effect of softening the environment so that sort of unnatural, rigid, coercive form of government could no longer prosper, and they just got washed away. And that's what I'd like to see happen again. I'd like to see a world group, 10,000 people have the same effect on us,
And now you're trying to gather a group yourself, right, in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a much smaller scale, but I've worked out, or I'm working on a protocol at the moment. Hope to work with one of the veteran TM Super Radiance researchers, and the idea that I've got is to demonstrate to the government. So if they're getting involved at the beginning and putting a little bit of money in, and then we get a semi-permanent group involved in a particular county in the UK. So I'm talking about maybe 140 people, and then watch all the different aspects of society change as a result of that. So want to monitor crime, suicide rates, accident and emergency unit call admissions, disease incidents of infectious diseases, economic activity, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, wow, that would be really interesting to do something where we're monitoring it from the beginning until the end.
Yeah, that's right. Because in the past, it's always that somebody who's doing TM or a TM researcher or whatever is doing it, or Maharishi has set up a project and it happens to have lots of TM SIDRs there, so they've monitored it. So the science is correct, but it hasn't had quite the impact of forcing someone to actually look at it, beforehand, with the exception of possibly the Washington course, where John Hagelin set up a group there for about 2 months in Washington and predicted in advance and told the police what was going to happen, the Justice Department, everybody else, look, we're going to try and reduce crime by 20%. And he was just laughed at, of course. And I think that the police commissioner there said, well, if you can reduce, there's as much chance of you reducing crime by 20% as 20 inches of snow coming down in Washington. And actually we had a heat wave during that particular project. But, you know, with enough SIDARs, it went down 23% in the end. So that was it. And,
that's a really famous project that
yeah, that's right. That's right. A lot of people have heard about it. It was good fun. It's good fun, but yeah.
I'm just going to quickly share some of these statistics so people can see for themselves. I don't know if you can you guys see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so this is from, just to show us an examples for people who want to see. So this is the statistics of how much. So for example, the first USA Super Radiance results, and you can see how the
Well,
violence.
QOL stands for quality of life. So they
Okay, there you
take
go.
these aspects: violent crime, fatal car crashes, fatal accidents, air traffic fatalities. Yeah, it's amazing how I didn't know there were so many that they could, you know, monitor it like that. But,
Yeah, and then you have the different towns, so you can see the super radiance effect reduced the number of crimes by quite a lot. And this was the sort of baseline. This was the regular one, and then this was the super radiance effect.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Number of crimes per day. That is.
Per day, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you have the Washington one here, -4.
That was during a world peace project. So they had a global group in America at the time, I think, and it was only there for a week or so. It wasn't a long project. So the effect on Washington, as I say, wasn't that great, but it was -4%. But Karachi, 16%, and Victoria in Australia was 13%. So it was having an impact across the globe. And the reason why we've only got so few figures there was it was very difficult at the time to get comparable figures that meant something. So these are sort of fairly uniform figures. So those are the ones used in the study.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Well, that's, I mean, so, well, ultimately for you, from your perspective, does this prove that we have global consciousness, that we have united consciousness?
Oh yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, it's very difficult to explain. I've in my book Super Radiance Effect, I've tried to explain it, but I quite understand if some top scientist comes and says no, it doesn't work like that. It's some will, okay, fair enough. What I'm interested in is the practical research. That if you do one thing, you suddenly get an effect somewhere else, and that you can predict, which is one of the fundamentals for scientific research. You can predict it, it's consistent, it happens every time, it's reliable. And okay, if we don't know quite how it functions or the reason why, that's not so important as knowing that it really does happen. And we should be replicating as much as we possibly can, especially these days. I mean, you know, things have got out of hand this year a little bit.
Exactly. And the worst thing is that this is, well, it's not totally free, but again, people can do it free if they wanted to, and it doesn't cost as much money as it does, you know, to go to war or
Oh,
to.
I see what you mean. Well, yeah, if in all seriousness, if you want a group to stick together for you know, a permanent basis, I think you're going to have to pay them.
Yeah.
In a sense, we've been trying for years to get groups together in an ad hoc, amateurish way while they're doing whatever they're doing career-wise or raising families or whatever, and it hasn't happened yet. So it's long overdue. I mean, the pundits that Maharishi gathered together in India back in the late 80s and early 90s were there professionally. They were training to become pundits, or they were acting as pundits. So that was their career, that was their job, and they were doing the TM City program at the same time. We don't have that career in our society, so I think we need to draw people together, pay them a salary of some sort, so that they do turn up every day and they're there at, you know, 7 o'clock in the morning and doing their bit for mankind.
Yes, totally. Well, with that in mind, let's hear a little bit from Ron and his participation in some of the transcendental meditations, and we'll be going back and forth with all the questions.
Okay.
So, Ron, how are you? Actually, first of all, tell me a little bit about clay hands and how it came about. What was the intention behind it? It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting organization that you have there with helping street kids through meditation. So I'd love to know a bit about that.
Well, thank you, Desi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I've been going to Colombia for the last 35 years. My first trips to Colombia were as a teacher of transcendental meditation, but then after a few years, Colombia had its own TM teachers. And I went back to Colombia, though, as a gem dealer because Colombia happens to have the finest emeralds in the world.
Mhm.
And that was when I met Father Gabriel Mejia, a Catholic priest in the city of Medellin, Colombia. And to meet him was pretty amazing. You come up to him and you feel like the wrinkles around his eyes are really exclamation points because his gaze penetrates your being. He's a man full of warmth and the type of warmth that you spontaneously recognize as this man is a spiritual man, a man of God, without a doubt. And so over the years, I continued assisting what I could, the TM organization in Colombia. But we noticed that Father Gabriel Mejia was rehabilitating many children, boys mainly, between the ages of 9 and 17 in Medellin, Colombia. Of course, he was using Catholicism and good service and good food and community as a way to rehabilitate these kids. But the core, the basis of his rehabilitation was the transcendental meditation technique, which is 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. But he added to that the TM Siddhi program, which made these little teenagers into siddhas, which just,
Wow.
I cannot think of any more great endorsement of transcendental meditation than the fact that any of you out there that are dads or moms, you know how hard it is to get a teenager to sit down and do anything. Well, try to imagine young, teenage, homeless, drug addicts, glue sniffers, delinquents, very difficult teens. And Father Gabriel got them all meditating because the TM technique is such a natural, basic, elemental process. It requires no concentration. It's a simple, natural response of your mind and body to its own natural tendencies. So he was so successful in rehabilitating these boys with meditation and the Siddhis program that after about 8 years, the Colombian government, they were just being exasperated. They're so shrouded with organized crime. That happened to be the years that Pablo Escobar was at his maximum strength in 1988 to 1993.
Yeah.
The Medellin cartel was actually giving money to anybody who would shoot a policeman, a judge, a journalist, or any authority figure, even a priest.
Wow.
So Father Gabriel at this time, he was shot at twice by the Medellin cartel.
Wow.
And I guess being a priest did not exempt him from getting shot at, but it did exempt any of the bullets that were shot at him from ever hitting him. One time he was shot at 5 times within 10 yards away and every bullet missed.
Oh wow. It's
He
pretty.
was also kidnapped by Los Pepes. Los Pepes, if anybody watches the Netflix series Narcos, Los Pepes were the enemies of Pablo Escobar. But what happened was that the government had seized one of Pablo Escobar's houses, and they gave the house that Pablo Escobar had over to Father Gabriel to put 100 of his 9 to 17-year-old boys in to start meditating. But the Pepes didn't know that, so they kidnapped Father Gabriel and said, they handcuffed him and they put him in their car. They said, we're going to blow up your house because you're living in Pablo Escobar's house. And Father Gabriel is going, no, that house, it belongs to me now. It used to be Pablo Escobar's house. And they didn't believe him until he could finally produce the papers that showed that the government did indeed give him that house. So the Los Pepes, they eventually let him go. They unhandcuffed him and made him walk home. But Father Gabriel told me later that he could really tell those guys had that dynamite in the car. They really wanted to blow something up.
Wow.
But Again, what a great testimony for the power of being in touch with your inner divine self, the inner unboundedness that all of us have. What we miss, though, in our daily life is the ability to close our eyes and immediately contact that inner unboundedness.
Totally.
Everybody has it, but everybody misses it because we're all so distracted with our minds, with our intellects full of things. We desperately need a technique that can give us, within a few minutes, transcendence. And transcendence is real, it's genuine, it's measured by a reduction in metabolic rate. See, I've been self-employed for 30 years. I'm a results type of guy. I hate wasting my time. So, and transcendental meditation, it brings results right away. You don't have to wait 3 years until you finally get the idea of meditation. No, these kids, within the first 3 days of meditation, they're getting this deep metabolic rate, reduction in metabolic rate, 17%, galvanic skin response changes, the blood chemistry changes. It's a true natural release of stress and strengthening of the system. So Father Gabriel was creating bigger and bigger groups of boys. And when the TM Cities program came out in 1978, immediately Father Gabriel started his boys learning the TM City program, which coincided with Columbia. The TM Center was doing the same thing. So amazingly, Columbia went from what was almost a failed state in 1989 to what it is now. Columbia is a tourist destination with fantastic foreign investment, stable democracy. Colombia really is one of the lighthouses of Latin America. And Medellin as a city, was just this year on the Forbes list of the 20 best places to retire. So Medellin went from being the murder capital of the world, according to Time magazine, to a tourist destination for expats and, according to Forbes, one of the best places to retire. What greater testimony for this simple technique. So I started.
This was due to the transcendental meditation that was introduced by Father Gabriel in Colombia.
Yeah.
Yes, it's pretty obvious that was a huge contributor. Jeremy Old was beautifully describing some of the scientific studies in which our group would announce beforehand what we expected to happen and then do the program, and those results were measured, and the results were out there in the public record, FBI crime statistics, things like that. So there was no way we could cherry pick the data, you know? Yeah. So it really works. And the most beautiful thing, Jeremy used the word super radiance. It's a scientific term for the propagation of orderliness in systems like lasers or something. And super radiance, or the Maharishi effect, it's really proof that consciousness is universal. And it's a revolutionary idea that is taking over the world right now, because scientists have typically thought always that consciousness exists as brain activity inside your head and nothing else. Yeah. And any of us that have been in an airport or a public space and you can feel somebody looking at you, consciousness is out there. It's not in your head. And it's wonderful that we have some way of proving, without a doubt, the scientists can no longer reassure themselves that their materialistic view of the world is the correct paradigm. The new paradigm is that consciousness is a field, just like the electromagnetic field. It's infinite, it's there all the time. We can contact it. We can use it to improve city life by reducing crime statistics and improving the quality of life, like Jeremy Old was talking about. So my nonprofit, Clay Hands, after 25 years as an emerald dealer, I wanted to give something back to Colombia. So I started this nonprofit, and Desi, you explained it very well. We teach and promote alternative construction to give employment and give back to Colombia. And we also do a lot of work with Father Gabriel and his foundation called Hogares Claret.
Mm.
So what I had to do, my very first project with clay hands was we built a flying hall. And a flying hall is essential to any super radiance activity because you can sit anywhere, even on a bus to do TM. You can meditate anywhere. But when you do the Cities program, you're quiet for about 15 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes. But then the last part of the TM Cities program is yogic flying. And yogic flying is another mental technique, but it releases so much inner energy of unboundedness that it's the only natural thing you can do is bound upwards into the air. And most of us are in the first stage of yogic flying, which you basically bound up into the air and you're right back on the foam again. You sort of bounce around like a happy jumping bean or something like that.
Okay.
And the reason we call it a flying hall is because to call it hopping or jumping does not come anywhere near explaining or sharing what that inner feeling is. I swear, when I do the yogic flying, it would cost me more energy to stay sitting on the ground than to just let go and bound upward into the air. The lightness, the weightlessness overtakes you. And it's precisely at that moment of what we call liftoff that the brainwave coherence is at the absolute maximum. And this brainwave coherence, which also occurs during the meditation, but it's at the maximum during the liftoff of the flying, the yogic flying. And that's what propagates into the world. And if done in a group, like Jeremy said, it will, without a doubt, cause the super radiance effect, which reduces crime, accidents, and increases the quality of life of a city. So we built a flying hall in Sasaima, Colombia for 110 boys. And it has been in full operation for the last 2.5 years. And you'll hear, in the future, you'll hear more and more about flying halls because they'll be found in church basements, universities. We hope to see them in more and more places because you do need a place covered with foam on the floor so you can bounce around. That's
Wow.
That's what a flying hall is.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I can see why kids would like that. I can see why they would want to try it. You know, it sounds fun. Okay, let's fly. Okay. I love how you are combining, you know, the big picture of sort of the unity consciousness that can be achieved in mass meditations with the individual effects it can have on on individuals. So for example, the life of these kids that you are working with specifically, and what are some of the so what happens after that once they're in the program? How long do they have to be part of it, and what happens to them after that? Do they continue to do transcendental meditation, or do they go into something else?
Yes, well, Father Gabriel has, over the last 30 years, rehabilitated 100,000 boys. And in the many countries in Latin America send their rehabilitation professionals to learn the techniques that Father Gabriel is using in his process. But what happens is that the boys go through a 9-month program. It's usually 9 months. And within the first 3 weeks, they learn meditation. And within the first 3 months, they learn the TM Cities program and yogic flying. And actually, the beautiful part is, since he has these kids all the time, they're not limited to 20 minutes of TM and 30 minutes of the Cities program. They can do a little extra and do better for themselves and do better for the environment as well. So the boys will graduate, and Father Gabriel tries to unite those young boys back with their families. A lot of them are homeless kids, street kids, delinquents, and some of the kids come to him from the juvenile correction facilities, the jails, for delinquency. And some of these kids try to imagine Medellin, Colombia in 1989. Some of these teenage boys are killers. In fact, Father Gabriel had to start, this is so absurd, you won't believe it. Father Gabriel started something called the Don't Kill Club. And
Wow.
this was a support group for teenagers who have already killed somebody, because like I told you, Pablo Escobar was offering $100 to anybody who would kill an authority figure in Medellin at the time. Pablo Escobar was without a doubt a terrorist. He was the worst thing that happened to the world. And yet he's glorified with so many Netflix programs. I can't believe it. But
I hope
anyhow,
it's on Father Gabriel's work, because he's doing a lot more than Pablo Escobar. So, well, in a positive way.
it's
So,
true, it's true. And so some of these kids, they go, Padre Gabriel, I killed somebody. How can I ever recover, from my sins? And Father Gabriel goes, close your eyes and transcend, and it will be your glorious punishment. So these boys, he tries to reunite them, and they're free to continue meditating when they go back to society. But what we're trying to put together now is a program like what we need is a big flying hall in Medellin, Colombia, or some other places, so that the young boys will have a place to do their meditation, because they go back to some broken homes or some poverty, and it's not always an easy place or time to do your daily meditations. But a lot of these young rehabilitated boys request to be part of Father Gabriel's teaching staff, because they know how their life has changed. So they try to help other young boys change their lives.
wow, that's really incredible. And who would have known that is because of the transcendental meditation experiences that were happening in Colombia. That's pretty much why Colombia improved in such a huge way, because again, so many people thought of Colombia as one of the most dangerous places, back in the 90s and in 2000s, and then after that it just shot up. So yeah.
It's true. The mayor takes credit, the police department takes credit, everybody takes credit, but Winston Churchill recognized something very deep about the true place where credit is going, and that is the level of deserving. Winston Churchill said that you cannot guarantee success in war, but you can deserve it. And that level, that very fine level of deserving is the level of the purity or strength of your collective consciousness as a city or as a nation or as the world. And we've already proved without a shadow of a doubt that consciousness is beyond your head. It's universal, that there is a field of collective consciousness. And so if we can enliven or strengthen this level of deserving, then we are improving life, not only for ourselves, but for the whole world.
Wow, that's really well said. Thank you, Ron, for that, everything that you shared. Just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, make sure you write them in the chat, whether you're on the YouTube channel or in Zoom. You can just put them in the chat, and we'll discuss those in a minute. But I just want to go back to the original mass meditations that happened during the 70s and the 80s. Jeremy, you were both, well, Jeremy, you took part in those as well, and you specifically, I remember us speaking about the events in Poland where you went in the middle of a mass war zone, where basically
it was Croatia.
Oh, Croatia, that's it.
Yes, yeah. It was the dissolution of Yugoslavia, and I think, is it Slovenia was probably first out. Croatia was disputed with the federal government, or what was left of the federal government, Serbia. And I was part of a group that went in then. And as the group grew, so the war activities dissipated as in a wider and wider circle, until we'd got the Super Radiance effect for Croatia, which I think was about 400 people. It might be slightly less than that. It wasn't very large anyway. And the day we got the Super Radiance group, all fighting stopped everywhere.
Wow.
And Germany announced that they would recognize Croatia's independence. Then another country followed, then the EU followed, and everyone followed after that. So at that point, it would have become an international war. So it's like a structure had been created for Croatia to then continue. Unfortunately, we left a few days after that, and some fighting did then erupt, particularly in Dubrovnik and Mokobar, I think it was called. They were very bad incidences prior to us getting there, but it's all petered out very quickly, because Croatia at that point had become a nation state, and sort of dynamics had changed. That's in contrast to what happened in Bosnia a year or so later. It was terrible, terrible events, and Croatia was going the same way. Everyone was predicting a cataclysm when we were going over there. Looking back on it, you know, it's sort of mad to go into a place like that. But when you've done this a few times, and when you've been doing the city program for a long time, you do have that natural confidence that it works. It's not a brave thing to do to go into a war zone. You know, as long as there's enough of you, and we're not talking about a battalion or a regiment of people. It's just a small group. As long as you've got enough people, you know that it works, and it is effortless. It's very enjoyable. I mean, it's, you know, my recollection of the project in Croatia is a holiday. It was just a lovely time to sit in a group, and we were right by the sea, and I didn't do much sunbathing or swimming or anything like that. We were stuck indoors, but it's just lovely. And I didn't hear an explosion. I heard one explosion the whole time we were there. I think someone, and a machine gun went off at one point. Some idiot dropped his assault rifle in the middle of the night, you know, but that was it. Whereas outside our bubble, people were dying, people were getting killed, and actually meditators were being sent to the front and then persuading their commanding officers that they were more useful to their unit if they came back and stuck in the group. It was a wonderful experience altogether. People began to understand, because there was enough of us, the local authorities and the business community began to understand what was actually happening.
That's so interesting. And I remember you mentioned before that you were collecting news, newspaper cuttings, and how as gradually as
that's right. I mean, it's hardly scientific research, but I was determined to monitor for myself the effects that we were having. And I tried to get hold of any newspaper or journal or whatever it was, a Time magazine, The Economist, Times, Financial Times, New York Times, or whatever. And I tried to write down what they were saying as the days went by, which is how I discovered that as the numbers in our group grew, we had sufficient people for the town we were in the day we arrived. I can't remember how many it was. There weren't that many of us, but there was an air raid predicted for most of the country. I think 20 towns got bombed that night, and Pula, where we were, which is a naval garrison town, was on the list as well. And for somehow somebody forgot to fly over Pula, and it didn't get bombed. I'm very relieved to say, but was a little bit worrying. We arrived at the hotel, and there was a blackout on. Everything was. And there were a few candles, and we had to go into reception, and we all rushed off and did our meditation in our rooms. Make sure it didn't happen. You know, we don't need anti-aircraft guns. We just close our eyes and meditate. And from that time onwards, every day, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, a few more people would arrive, and so our effect grew in a wider and wider and wider circle, and you could actually see the effects in different towns, things like that. So suddenly there was no fighting here, no fighting there, and we got nearer and nearer the effect. There was no fighting at all, and then when we hit the magic number, Super Radiance effect for the whole country, poof, all evaporated, gone.
and it's just as quick as that, isn't it? You literally
That's why I said the motto at the World Peace Group was, world peace in 24 hours. Bit of an exaggeration perhaps, but it sort of brings home the point that when we're there and we do it, it happens. It's consciousness. We're having an effect on the collective consciousness, that is the individual consciousness of everybody in the community. And that has different effects. It works in 2 different ways. One is that individuals within the population are less inclined to go out and do something violent. Ron was talking about the brainwave coherence when we do the flying. Well, that brainwave coherence is mirrored in the individuals in the host community, and that's been shown in laboratory tests as well. You can actually monitor the brains of people out in the community, and there will be some correlation between what's going on in the program room at the same time. So members of the community are less likely to go out and do unnatural, violent, hostile, aggressive things. At the same time, on the positive side of life, the police and the other agencies and things like that are working more coherently together to keep the lid on things and make progress and fight crime and so on and so forth. So I would imagine in Colombia there was less corruption in the police force and so on and so forth. So it's sort of working on.
So it's having an all-around effect in every.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's really powerful. And Ron, is that the experience you had in Nicaragua when you did the mass meditations there? Was that similar in I think it was 1978 where you went?
Yes, it was 1978, and try to imagine how confident Maharishi must have felt even way back then to send his precious and beloved TM teachers and TM Siddhas to these war zones to test what was only proven a couple years before. Like Jeremy said, the first scientific studies on collective consciousness were 1974, 1975, and 6, but they were all consistently good, showing the anticipated results. And so I went with 3 other TM teachers to Nicaragua to help set up the situation. And within about 3 weeks, more and more Siddhas were coming to the one big hotel in Managua, Nicaragua. And this is all during the civil war. And it's very much like Jeremy was describing in Croatia. The expectations were just more war, more fighting. Slowly our group got bigger and bigger, and slowly the fighting went down. It was a civil war. The Sandinista Liberation Front was trying to violently take over President Anastasio Somoza's regime. And we were there for between August and January, so about 5 or 6 months. And by the end of the 3rd month, there was so much peacefulness in Managua, Nicaragua, that even taxi drivers, and you know, taxi drivers, they're kind of grouchy old guys that they're not really upbeat type of guys, but they would grudgingly admit that yes, Nicaragua is a better place to be in right now. It's gotten better. Traffic is easier. The violence has reduced, and they were that was one level of scientific verification. The other was that when it was all over, there were some data gathered. And if you go to the website of Jeremy Old, the one he mentioned, worldpeacegroup.org,
yeah,
that would all the results are validated there. But at the very end, the Somoza regime never recognized our group as being coherence creators or creators of peace. And so we left in January. And yet, interestingly enough, the revolutionaries, the Frente Sandinista de Liberación Nacional, the FSLN, they recognized our peace creating group. And I'm publishing a book right now that shows a letter that we got from the Sandinista Liberation Front threatening to kill us if we didn't leave, because they thought that our efforts were blocking their violent revolutionary efforts to overthrow the government. And I was with 3 other Siddhas when that letter was delivered to us, and it was amazing. They threatened to send their assassination brigades to kill us if we stayed. They gave us 48 hours to leave. And by then the big group had already left. The date of the letter was January 2nd. But we stayed for 3 more weeks just because there was so much to do. We felt kind of invincible anyhow. And it wasn't really denial, but maybe it was just denial. I don't know.
Stubbornness.
Yeah. But interestingly that they recognized our efforts, and now they're ruling Nicaragua. The Sandinistas continue to be the governing organization of Nicaragua.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I mean, you would think that after all of these years and after so many experiments and you know, tests and seeing positive results every single time this is done, that the governments in every country will be doing this right now, but somehow it's not.
Desi, what you're saying is so beautiful, and that's probably the reason why we have to have events like this that we're doing right now, because it is true that consciousness is not in your head. It's a field. We can influence it. We can improve the world. You would expect the world to beat a path to our door, especially with the scientific results, reliable and repeatable and proven results. But just because I don't know why the world has not beaten a path to our door. maybe Jeremy knows.
Well, it's something to do with our belief systems, isn't it? We're wedded to the superstition of materialist life. So what we can't see doesn't exist. And unfortunately, there's a quality of the brain, of the mind, called confirmation bias. And it's run by the fact that what we perceive through our senses gets filtered in the brain, and our belief system regulates what we actually consciously perceive inside the brain. So if we don't believe something, we often can't actually see it, literally can't hear it, or we go into denial about it. There's another aspect called cognitive dissonance. If you are ever talking to someone about, say, super radiance, or if you're say talking to a doctor about some aspect of natural medicine which happens to work, they can sometimes react in fairly volatile ways. They might get very angry, or they'll start laughing or smirking or giggling, or, you know, they feel very uncomfortable. And what that is the stress response. What's triggering that stress response is a threat to their belief system. So our belief system is very important to us. It's how we run our lives. It's how we cope with the sort of random nature of life. We almost like we work and function inside this bubble of beliefs. So what we have to do, and one of the reasons why I set up the website, is to try and bombard people with more facts about what's actually going on. And there's a drip, drip, drip effect can actually erode this confirmation bias. The other thing that erodes confirmation bias is, of course, if you meditate, it gradually shifts your belief patterns. Literally the neural pathways in the brain begin to change, so you're able to pick up on things that you didn't beforehand believe in. That's a slow process, possibly, but it does work. But I found in my management work that where you're trying to confront individuals with what's really going on in an organization, managers are particularly prone to believing that everything's okay. With their system they've created, they run it, and when one or two people go and say, no, it's not working quite right, boss, you know, this is going wrong, they're termed as whistleblowers and fired, you know, because the managers can't cope with it. But if you get enough people to say, look, it's not working quite the way you think it is, those facts just overwhelm that belief system and they can shift it. But those are fairly weak beliefs. Where we are conditioned from birth to accept the sort of duality of life, that, you know, we're in here and everything else is out there, and we function on that basis, on a daily basis, all our lives. That's tough to penetrate, and that's why we're having trouble talking to people about super radiance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's repeated everywhere, isn't it? So many people, especially in the spiritual field, continue to say beliefs are our biggest blocks, because beliefs literally, like you just said, they blind us from seeing the truth a lot of the time. So
yeah, that's right. It's really
about addressing some of those.
Disbelief is a belief, you know. It's
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to get one of our listeners here, or audience, to pitch in on this, who was one of my previous guests on Bridging the Realm, Andrew Weston, because he's an Ascension Master Healer, so he can see things from a sort of a lot higher perspective. So Andrew, what do you think about this idea and that the belief system and how it's blocking us in the whole consciousness field? What would you say about that?
High recognition when it comes to soul recognition is understanding our starlight energy systems. We come from energy pods. We come from a starlight energy system through a planet location system. It uprises our divisions through the chakra location systems. It's all about understanding your energy patterns, your chakras, and everything through communication lines. It's all about our alignment. It's all about coming together. It's a peace treaty through connection when it comes to dimensional vibrational system. Three-dimensional system have to understand that the five-dimensional system is changing all locations as we're coming into the fourth winning cycle into the fifth-dimensional vibrational activation code system.
Oh, it's breaking up a little bit. Okay.
So I know it's extremely high rise through vocabulary, but that's what consciousness is, guys. It's going way beyond the mind. It's actually seeing the soul. Seeing the soul is the answer to everything through its pattern. That's the answer through its communication lines. So everything is force rising through communications. I mean, everything that it's fascinating. All the conversations that you guys are going through, you just have to understand the soul recognition. Then you get the answer in your patterns within through all information when it comes to believing cycles. That's a believing system, which is soul recognition.
So just to translate for those who didn't get that, but yeah, I mean, from your perspective, global consciousness, we certainly have global consciousness. We are definitely not separate because we have our soul, our spirits, which is all connected to one another, isn't it? On a spiritual level, on a non-physical level.
Yeah, yeah. It's just we're all lost in transition. So just think of us, it's over 7 billion people in a flotation device that's asleep. Okay, they're in an ice cube. All right, and all of a sudden we wake up through the E-fields. Once you break up the plastic bubbles, now we're in the energetic through its location, through body activation, the starlight recognition systems, starlight vibrational panel activation code systems.
But now we're at a point where we are kind of waking up, aren't we? A lot more people.
Yeah, we're all waking up now, yeah.
Yeah.
And faster and faster. And the cycles to the dimensional earth is going through its nature core division. Everything is set through location.
So we're ascending. Well, thank you, Andrew, for that input. That was really helpful. I just wanted to but that's what really the Katalyst is about.
Yeah.
It's really about combining, you know, this information. So
yeah, I'm going to uprise everybody here at the end of the film. So.
Which means we're going to get an upgrade. So
you guys are going to see what I'm talking about. Your energy systems are going to change. Your energetic wavings. You're going to know what consciousness is. You're going to see space. You're going to see connection. You'll see Mother Gaia. You're going to see Father. You're going to see your soul connection. So it's kind of like rebirthing your systems through your star recognition system, opening up those energy pods, putting it on tracing your lights to your planet system. That's the location through the chakra system, dimensional realm, divisional love action code systems. That translates to all communication levels to your body activation systems.
Thank you, Andrew.
Right.
Jeremy and Ron, I just wanted to ask, you know, just before we end the session, what last words would you say for anyone, any of those people watching, and anyone who's interested in transcendental meditation or anything similar to this? What would you say? You know, how can we use this in our own individual lives and also for the global?
Oh, you're asking me personally, right?
Yeah, to you and,
yeah, look, learning to meditate is very easy. Just go along to your nearest TM teacher. If you go to the TM website, there's just Google transcendental meditation and you can learn. And it only takes 2 or 3 days. It actually takes 1 day, but there's a 3-day follow-up. Ron will vouch for me. It is very easy to learn. The most difficult thing for people in the West to do with meditation is to recognize how easy it is. It is effortless, and everything we do tends to be an effort. If it's good, there's got to be an effort to it. You know, no gain without pain and all that sort of nonsense. So understanding meditation is A, very beneficial, and B, very easy, is something difficult for people to grasp. But yeah, just try it for yourselves, and you just introduce it into your daily routine, morning and evening, 20 minutes, and you are having a massive impact on everybody else in society, and also getting lots of benefits yourselves. But Ron's the expert on that, so I'll hand you over to him on that.
What's your take, Ron, on how people can better use this in our own lives, individually and collectively?
Yes, well, I would say to start to pay more attention to this new paradigm of a connected world consciousness, and to take a visit to tm.org and learn a little more about transcendental meditation, how easy it is to learn. It's available all over the world. And I'm always reminded back to 800 years ago, Joaquin de Fiore, a Catholic monk, he prophesied, spiritual power alone will rule the world, and that our world will be basically a heaven on earth. In order to get there, we will have to go through some bumps and some transformations. One of them might be the one we're going through right now, a global pandemic. But even historians agree that after every pandemic and after every large disruption like that, civilization as a whole improves, gets better. And we just want to accelerate that path of getting better by creating more meditators, more siddhas. We need more flying halls in the world, and that's the way we can do it. So you can also visit clayhands.org, that's my website, or even emeraldmind.com, that's another website I have.
For anyone who
So,
purchased Emerald.
Another thing we can do is just listen to Desi and follow her as she follows this whole path in the next months and years to come.
Oh, thank you, Ron. That's really kind of you.
Very good.
Thank you. Yes, and Jeremy, people can, if people want to get involved with either the Transcendental Meditation group that you want to form, or to hear more about, to see some of those experiments from the 70s and 80s, they can visit worldpeacegroup.org.
That's right, worldpeacegroup.org, and there's my book as well, The Super Radiance Effect,
Yes.
which is available on Amazon.
Yeah,
and that's got all the research projects in it, including the laboratory ones, which we haven't really touched on today, and an introduction, a certain amount about global consciousness, collective consciousness. I've tried to make it an enjoyable read. I've tried to extract the key points from the research and put it into English.
It is. It's a very easy read, and it's really interesting with all the graphs and the data.
Yeah, that's right. I try to make it visual, so to bring home the point as emphatically as I can.
Very good for people who are very logical and, you know, want the proof.
That's right. I mean, it's indisputable when you see, you know, the first experiment. Okay, well, that sounds good, but I can, you know, disbelieve that. And then the second experiment, then the third, and then the fourth. And, you know, when you get up to 21, for goodness sake,
how much can you disapprove?
You can't keep on disbelieving it. You gotta,
exactly.
it's every time, you know. You can set your watch by it. Yes,
certainly. And, you know, I really do hope that we get more of these, because that's the easiest and the quickest way to solve, you know, all the problems.
Well, if anyone who's watching has anything to do with the government,
yes, please.
I've got my can out and I'm rattling it, and you know, we need a few bob, and it's money in English terms, and a few shillings. And yeah, I say this pilot study is a go. I think it could do very well, and it could be the starting point for getting a larger group in the UK. You know, we really need it here.
Yes, definitely.
Every country needs its own group.
Yeah. Well, let's set that intention for the future,
Yeah.
and we'll have that. But it's really interesting how this. I mean, it's a shame that we don't have our last guest today, Roger Nelson, who's the founder of the Global Consciousness Project, because his data proves from a scientific basis that the global consciousness does exist, and that we can alter reality with our mind. So
Right.
you know, it blends beautifully with all of your research and all the work that Ron is doing. So it's really, I mean, there's no question about it. It's we definitely have global consciousness. So
Yeah.
So Jeremy and Ron, thank you.
Let's all agree. Yes. Well, thank you, Desi. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you so much. And guys, all the links to any of their websites can also be found on my website. So if you do want to learn more about their work, then you can visit the website www.Katalyst Film Event, and all the information will be also there. And now we're going to prepare for a 15-minute break, after which we're going to have the film screenings, which will be centered around today's topic, which is unity in global consciousness. And we do actually have one of our filmmakers present, one of the writers of one of the films present, Dales Fortier, who is going to be presenting his wonderful film. And actually, Dales, before we go, would you like to present your film from now, so that people kind of know what they'll be be watching soon.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, all of you speakers. Wow, what an incredible conversation. I'm just in awe. So just to give a little bit of a sense of the piece that we're going to be sharing, it's called Making Time. And it's an exploration in our capacity as creators to actually generate, create aspects of reality with everything that we're putting out, our thoughts, our words, our actions, and how this actually ties into the multidimensionality of ourselves as individuals, but also as a collective. So this short film is a collaboration with a bunch of different incredible artists. It includes live music performance by Sophia, a dance performance by Rowan and Vidi, and a spoken word piece that I specifically crafted for this type of collaborative offering.
Brilliant. That's it's fascinating. It's a fascinating film to watch, so I definitely recommend for everyone to stay behind to watch that. But so you're also a ceremonial facilitator and a certified transformational artist, as well as a poet. So tell me a bit about that.
Sure, it's a long conversation, but I'll give you the nutshell version of it. So when I was 21, I actually left society to go be a monk through self-realization fellowship and got initiated into Kriya Yoga. But I was very young and they told me to go get more life experience before I took lifelong vows. So I came back to society and had a really challenging time reintegrating back into the world because I didn't actually care to participate in a lot of the things that society holds up as priorities, high values. And so I spent quite a few years just wandering and studying and practicing, trying to figure out how to exist in this world in a meaningful way, while also prioritizing my spiritual practice. I ended up coming across this incredible training by Dana Lynn Anderson called Transformative Art. And I took a program from her called Creativity and Consciousness. And that program reconciled a lot of the challenges that I was facing in life. The essence of that program was actually resensitizing to the entire internal landscape, the thoughts, the images, the emotions, the body sensations, really opening up to the full spectrum of the human experience that was available to us, every single one of us, and allowing those intelligent forces to move in and through us in various forms of expression.
Wow.
So in doing this, you dissolve inhibitions, fears, blockages around identity and around expression, because you take something like, if this is my anger, instead of being immersed in my anger and having that actually populate my thoughts and my behaviors and being possessed by that thing, by actually opening to it and exploring various aspects of it, its expression, its life force as an ally, as a collaborator, you start developing an objective relationship with this aspect of your experience. And in doing so, it not only allows you to build intimacy with it, but you free yourself from compulsive behaviors while also extracting and integrating a lot of the insights, the lessons, and therefore the transformative potential within that experience. And so if we adopt this as a way of being, recognizing that everything that we do is an act of creation that is being fed and fueled and informed by this collaborative internal experience with all of these living energies, then we actually enter into intimate relationship with every single one of our life experiences. And our life becomes a spiritual experience where nothing is separate. There's no difference between the external reality and the internal reality. It's all a dynamic interplay. So recognizing this quality to life allows us to intentionally explore it and activate very heightened states of consciousness very, very rapidly, and then integrate that in practical ways through our communication ability, through the quality of our relationships, and our awareness as a whole through all of the different dimensions of our being.
Wow, that is fascinating stuff. Really, really interesting. I mean, pretty much what we were saying earlier with the idea of using our energy for something positive. So that's such a great way to use any energy that you have, whether positive or negative, as a form of expression. So really, really interesting stuff. I definitely
Mm-hmm.
love to learn more about that. But you're going to stay until the end of the screening, so hopefully people can, yeah, if people want to know, make sure you guys join the Zoom chat, because we won't be able to screen the films live on YouTube, because some of the films are not actually released yet. So please do join us on Zoom. Otherwise, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and we're going to have a 10-minute break. I'm going to leave the YouTube live stream on so people can join in the next 10 minutes. Otherwise, yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. And the first film will be Making Time, so we're going to see Making Time for the first one, for the first session. So thank you guys so much, and we're going on a break, and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you.